Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our community conversation. Every week we're here to talk about the issues that are front and center and important in the state of Rhode Island, and tonight is no different. We'll be talking to Adoption Rhode Island. And one of the things that I am very interested in, as many who know me know, but to those who don't, it has to do with education of our youth in the state of Rhode Island. And I've made a commitment, a few weeks back to keep the racial justice issue open. The issue of justice in terms of education is one that I think is just a very important thing for not only the young people that live in the state and their families, but also to our economy in the state. And we've been focusing on small businesses now for several years and really focusing in on the importance of small businesses. So tonight we're going to talk about the education and in the foster children, in the state of Rhode Island. Thousands, and over years, thousands. And we're going to talk about the outcomes and then talk about strategies to help to improve those outcomes so that we improve the economic conditions and circumstances for the young people that are in foster care. And also, I just want to give a quick overview. We've had that show last week about music and the impact that the COVID's having on the music industry, the wedding industry, small businesses, on nursing homes. So we were still working very hard to make sure that the CARES Act dollars get distributed into our small business community as much into our nonprofits. And there's a great deal of work to be done. We have sent a letter to the governor this week asking for an accounting of the CARES Act dollars, not only what has been appropriated, but what has been spent, and real-time numbers. At this point, the General Assembly is working with estimated numbers, and estimated numbers can be misleading, and I believe that there's going to be millions of dollars that are going to not get used in the programs that have been started, whether it's in the Restore Rhode Island grant program that ended last night at 9 o'clock. We've asked for an extension for our businesses and our nonprofits to participate in that, all as well as the unemployment. The unemployment is 50 million in it. Might hit 100,000 people, 70,000 at start before the pause, 70,000, might get 30,000 more, it'll be 100,000, take $400 times 100,000, you got $40 million, it's $50 million there, so there's $10 million, what are we gonna do with that? Same thing on the pause grants, at the rate that we're going, and closing out on December 15th, for those companies that have been impacted by the pause, they can apply for as much as $50,000. Our office can help you. Call our office number. Ben will put that up there. Email us at the address that we set up there during the pandemic. But is that $50 million going to be used? $45 million on job training. These are all things that were appropriated for our small businesses. And we're saying account for all those dollars and then distribute those dollars back into a robust, very quick grant program for the small businesses, including the nonprofits, and there's work to be done there. So finally, I want to just say that I always talk about education and the impact that the COVID is having on our schools and our students. So right now, we know that it doesn't matter whether you're in a high income, low income, moderate income. Doesn't matter if you're minority, non-minority household. Doesn't matter if you're at a public school, a private school, a mayoral academy, a charter school, a home school. Our young people are losing out on thousands of hours of learning time right now because of the virtual learning and the burden that's on our school districts to figure it out. And so we can't put the whole, all that responsibility on our school districts. They're going to have enough to handle over the next 12 to 24 months just to get back up to speed. We need to open up strategies like I'm suggesting, municipal education departments, customize those to the communities that they exist in. I opened up one in 2007. So we're coming on 14 years, starting the 15th year. We were doing preschool in the town of Cumberland before preschool was even talked about. Thousands of kids have gone through our Office for Children, Youth and Learning, the Mayor's Office for Children, Youth and Learning, municipal education department, learning to read, do math, do science, do art, do music. theater, leadership programs, 52 weeks out of the year. That's what we need. We need to create a 52-week option that supplements our school day in order to, over a period of time, a couple years period of time, figure out a way to catch up on the hours that we're losing right now in the classroom, because those students are going to get impacted. Their economy is going to get impacted, as well as the families, and the state of Rhode Island's economy long-term for decades is going to get impacted unless we pay attention to that. So let's bring our guest on. I kind of give my own little overview of small business and education, but tonight we're going to talk about something very important and specific about what's going on. We have Darlene Allen, the CEO, Executive Director of Adoption Rhode Island. We have Steve Parente, Board President of Adoption Rhode Island, Senior Vice President at Bank RI. Dr. Shanna Pearson-Merkowitz, Director of Social Science Institute of Research, Education and Policy at URI. And Mary Caswell, Education Consultant in Adoption for Adoption Rhode Island, a Program Director for Foster Care Youth and former Principal. So thank you all for being on tonight. And let's start with Darlene. I think a reintroduction of each person and the role that you're playing would be really good before we kind of get into the meat of the discussion, which has to do with the educational outcomes for our the young kids that are in foster care. So, Darlene, just give a little view, then we'll go to Mary, we'll go to Shanna, and then we'll go to Steve, and just give a kind of introduction, reintroduce yourself to our audience. And I'm going to say again, share this out. People are watching this, share this out. The more sharing that goes on, the more hundreds of people are going to hear this important message tonight. Welcome, Darlene.
Well, thank you very much for having me and having all of us with you tonight. I am having a little technical difficulty, so I hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO of Adoption Rhode Island, and we are a nonprofit located in Providence, but we serve children and families throughout the state of Rhode Island. We serve more than 2,000 children per year, as well as provide lots of different services and supports to professional services and supports to teachers, social workers, and others throughout the year. Our mission really is around making sure that children have safety, permanency, and a real sense of belonging. And the issue that we're talking about tonight, educational outcomes for children, and particularly children in foster care, adopted children, children that have been impacted by trauma. Those are all things that are near and dear to our heart, things that we have been working on, caring about, and we're really motivated to make improvements in the state of Rhode Island. So thank you so much for inviting us on. That's great, Darlene, and thank you for being here. And we're going to get into a kind of robust conversation about education. As I don't know if you heard, but we've made a commitment to keep the community policing, the justice issues that kind of erupted this spring with the George Floyd issue, and we see that as a great opportunity. We had George Floyd's uncle on 2 weeks ago from South Dakota talking about that issue with a young man that's working on education policy with Black Lives Matter, along with the chief of police and from Brian Sullivan from the town of Lincoln, who's the president of the Police Chiefs Association, to keep that conversation going. I also have made a commitment to have to start this education conversation over the next year plus that I'm in office, a couple of years left as lieutenant governor. And then we're going to regularly talk about this. So this is launching our education discussion, Darlene, and we're going to launch it based on the young people, young men and women young kids that you're working with. So thank you for helping us launch this program. And we're going to continue to every few programs on this community conversation. We're going to talk in depth about education and ways that we can help all our 160,000 young kids in the state, which includes our kids in foster care, right? So that's great. Mary, please introduce yourself as well to the people who are watching.
My name is Mary Caswell, and I thought I was unmuted.
You're good now, yeah.
Oh, I'm good? I'm good. Okay. So my name is, thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor. Again, as Darlene mentioned, we appreciate the time to talk about this because we are passionate about this topic. For many years, I was I was a school principal in Pawtucket. I actually spoke with you when you were getting ready to do your mayoral academies many years ago. I was at Samuel Slater Middle School. And when I retired from there, I took a position with Hasbro, with Adoption Rhode Island, and with the University of Rhode Island to run a program called First Star URI Academy. And what it did was we identified 25 rising ninth graders in the foster care system. And we brought them to URI to live there for a month. Wow. We taught them all about what it takes to go to college at the exact right age, because ninth grade through 12th grade, those courses that the kids take are so important. So we were right there every step of the way, helping them choose classes, being their advocates in the schools. But they also stayed at URI for a month, took classes for college credit, took classes for high school recovery, did a lot of life skills, enrichment activities, lived in the dorms. Their favorite was eating in the dining halls. We had access to everything. President Dooley was wonderful, access to everything on campus at URI. And I'm happy to say that when the program, it was a grant program, and unfortunately the money wasn't there, but the results were fantastic. 24 of the 26 kids graduated high school on time. And when Dr. Pearson-Merkowitz tells you her stats, you're going to see that these were, phenomenal compared to the average foster child in Rhode Island. We also had several of them, 15 of them went to college for at least a year. We have several who are still in college. And probably one of the nicest things that happened, 35% of these kids were adopted as teenagers, which if you check into DCYF statistics, trying to adopt a teen is tough. And to get the kids to be for their forever family. So people saw that these kids had goals, and we helped them to achieve those goals. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. Once the funding ran out, I now serve as the educational consultant to Adoption Rhode Island. So I help all of our clients with anything related to education, whether it's applying to college, whether it's applying to a new school, whether it's reviewing their individualized education plans, their 504 plans, advocating for the kids, going to team meetings with them. So we do everything for education for our clients. It's a wonderful job because I love working with kids.
Yeah. Well, I recall talking to you about that during that time frame when we were just kind of kicking off the ground. I can tell you,
Mayor Doyle, yes.
Yes, Mayor Doyle, yes, and God bless him. He was.
I know.
He was a good friend of all of us. What a gentleman.
He was phenomenal.
Yeah. And so I do remember that, and I do know, through professionals like yourself, how important it is for that college campus experience before the young kids go to college. How important that is. One of the mainstays of the Mayoral Academy, as you know, is to get young kids on campus. These kids are coming from free and reduced lunch, probably 60-70% of them. We created a very diverse setting for our students coming from Cumberland, Lincoln, Pawtucket, Central Falls. And we know that that's so important. And we also, one of the things that we're doing and you're doing, which is great, is you're tracking these young kids. And we're going to talk after we introduce ourselves, you're tracking where these kids are, years after they've been in the education system, not only on income, but also on education levels. And right now we're tracking every college. We've had 3 high school graduates now after all these years at the Blackstone Valley Prep Mayoral Academy. We are tracking those young kids all the way through the 4 years of college. So some of them are entering their junior year now of college. And so we have about 98% tracking on every young kid that comes out of where they are, so that they can continue to use the resources of our guidance offices to help the young kids, whether they're transferring or whether they're having trouble. So I'm really impressed by the fact that you are tracking these young kids the way that you are. So that's great. So thank you.
Adoption Rhode Island continues to provide resources to the kids and support as well. So
I think that's phenomenal. Steve, introduce yourself, please, to the crew, and not only you're professional, but you're volunteering as a board chair and from Bank Rhode Island, which we've done some banking there. We actually do our Mayoral Academy banking there at Bank Rhode Island. So tell us a little bit about your background as a professional, but also, your role as a chair of the board. You got to unmute.
Well, yes, you do, Lieutenant Governor. You do. I shouldn't be. Can you hear me?
Yes, great. Yes.
Can everybody? You hear me? Okay. Okay. So yes, we do have the Rhode Island Mayoral Academy account at Bank Rhode Island. So thank you very much.
Yes.
My role there is I do a retail banking amongst several other business lines. So we have the largest population of hiring what typically is young youth. So this organization has we've been a friend to Adoption Rhode Island for a very long time, not just during my tenure of 8 to 9 years, but as the board president, obviously the youth in Rhode Island, not just their health and safety and well-being, but their education is very, very important because it feeds a workforce in Rhode Island that is also critical. And we've seen a lot of great programs move through Adoption Rhode Island over the last couple of years. Teen Focus, what we talked about last week, is certainly one of them. My role there as the board president is to really support and stay out of Darlene's way because she has a significant vision and she is a force to be reckoned with at a lot of levels. She's grown the organization immensely in the last 10 years, and I'm so proud and honored to be part of the organization. And at this point, I feel like Bank Rhode Island is a secondary professional component to what I do there. But I can tell you during my 25 years within financial services, I've always gravitated to some level of youth service organizations as far as being on the board at a lot of different elected levels, because I do feel and I still believe wholeheartedly that our youth in any community is really what drives and thrives our economics, but also our communities as a whole, our ability to give back and support each other as neighbors. And I really think that, your direction and vision over the years, especially what you've done in your own town in Cumberland, as far as focus on education, is so critical, not just every day, but during a time like this when I do believe that, our younger generation is struggling during this pandemic. It's important to provide as much support as we possibly can and to take a look at the kids that are serviced through DCYF and some of the struggles and the trauma that they have. This is even more difficult. I have two sons, one that's 23 and one that's 20. So this certainly hits close to my heart that education is very, very important, and the support that they're given, the direction that they're given, not just by their parents, but by their state leaders is very, very crucial and important. So I really appreciate you having us on today. I appreciate our conversation last week, and I really look forward to, seeing not only collaboratively what we can do together, but also the strides that we can make for this population that really truly needs the help right now.
Yeah, Steve. So two things. One is it's good that you recognize the value of a good executive director. My dad, when he was living in the 50s, he started the Boys and Girls Club in our town, the Boys Club. I ended up being president of the club and changed the name to the Boys and Girls Club. That was one of my roles, started the endowment fund for our local Boys and Girls Club. But my dad, when I went through all his notes, it took me a couple of years. As you know, it's not easy to lose your dad or your mom, and that's why we really sympathize with those families that are going through that right now with the COVID. And our prayers are with everybody. But I found a document that it was handwritten. Remember that? And my dad died in '86, so a lot of the stuff was on back of envelopes and stuff like that. But he had a wonderful letter that described the importance of an executive director, as he was referring to the executive director of the Boys Club at the time, and the board's responsibility towards the staffing, but also working directly with the executive director. So that rings a real strong bell. I know you have a tongue in cheek saying it, but we know that's so valuable to have a really strong advocate as executive director, especially being a member of a board like you are. So. And then the other thing, recognizing that the gaps that are happening right now. And so young kids, and Mary would know this, that are coming from, more challenging circumstances, they've historically have had more hurdles to get to the finish line to go over than your sons at 20 and 23. Mm-hmm. But your sons at 20 and 23 still have hurdles to jump to get the finish line, and we got to celebrate that. and congratulate them as they do that. But what happens now in these timeframes, that more hurdles are being put out there, but less of hurdles are being put in front of kids that are coming from better circumstances economically and you know, in terms of family and that type of thing, than kids that are historically struggling. So we know that, you know, as you described, you know, the foster children that you're working with have, you know, historically more hurdles to jump than our kids, right? I never take away the success that our kids have and your kids have, or whoever, because it takes a great deal of effort in normal circumstances. But we do recognize, and then you put COVID in here, you know, we've got more hurdles to jump to get to the finish line. Shanna, thank you for being here. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Shanna Pearson-Merkowitz. I'm a professor of political science at the University of Rhode Island. And I am the director of the Social Science Institute for Research, Education, and Policy at URI. And what the Institute does is we are really focused on making social science analysis and research applicable to helping the state of Rhode Island. So we work with our students and with community groups like Adoption Rhode Island to see what type of service professors and students can really serve to the community, and to make the work we do at URI feed back into the community. And so a lot of the projects we do involve our students getting applied work where they're taking all the skills they're learning in class and getting some time to actually apply them to the real world, so that they step out having having experience doing the type of work that you would do at an Adoption Rhode Island, at a bank Rhode Island, in the legislature, and not just the normal term paper that you write for class. And really a lot of the work we're doing is trying to bring data analysis, qualitative and quantitative analysis, into the hands of those who need it to make positive change. So I first started working on issues of adoption and foster care in Rhode Island about 6 or 7 years ago with the research collaborative, when the legislature actually sent out questions saying we need analysis about this. And one of the questions was about how to improve the educational outcomes of foster youth. And I got very excited about this. I had experience helping kids who were friends in the foster care system growing up, and seeing how critical it was to have an advocate that your parents would normally, be calling your teacher, arguing with them when things were going poorly, through college. How do you navigate FAFSA, right? All of these things. And when I saw the legislature was interested in this, my students and I ended up researching and writing a report together about what some of the best practices were nationwide that could be applied in Rhode Island to improve those educational outcomes. And that's how I first got in touch with Adoption Rhode Island. And since, we've been working together to try and improve the access to data about foster youth, because we really can't improve outcomes without knowing what the current landscape is. And so over the last couple of years, we've been working together to try and really analyze the data in Rhode Island to learn about what the educational outcomes of our youth, of our foster youth, are, and how they can be improved. So I'm currently working with another group of students who are doing amazing work looking at best practices nationwide, specifically for increasing access to higher ed. And Darlene and I have been having a fantastic partnership working with the Department of Labor and Training and RIDE to analyze the data we have on the foster youth who have aged out of our system and what their educational outcomes have been. So that's my kind of background, and I'm just so happy to be here today. So thank you.
Well, Shanna, you got a big fan. One of the young ladies that works in where I work with, Cheyenne. She's a big fan of yours. She just kind of posted that up, and I'm all in for URI. I understand they're getting beat tonight by Wisconsin, but I'm all in with URI, and have visited down there, met with a lot of the young people down there, men and women that are in the political science area. By the way, that was my major way back when I was in school. a political science degree with an education degree of all things, if you can imagine. Never got into the classroom. When I did my student teaching, I said, I'm not sure that's exactly for me, but I do have the background on the disciplines of, that you go through. And that's why I respect, Mary and the others there so much that are in the classroom, yourself. Not easy work, and very, very important work. So thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate, having an academic perspective to taking a look at the data. So important. I know that whatever we work on in terms of any policy, we want to bring in, people who really are strong on data and understanding that it's really important to know that, whether it's the work that I've done in education or the work I did as a mayor, addressing, police contracts, and that type of thing, and long-term, actuaries that need to be had. So thank you so much for being here. I wanted to, talk a little bit about the outcomes that you've measured, Darlene, and open it up to the panel that's familiar with this nice pamphlet that you've given me, the flyer, and it's talking about education outcomes, percentages in the foster student base, and then income strategies, and then other things in terms of outcomes and percentages of graduating college. Mary was talking about these young kids that visited the college and how they're moving along a little further because of that experience. But we'll get into the details. But give us kind of an overview here of the number of young kids that are in the system at a time, the number of kids you've measured in their education outcome, and then we'll talk about the economics that are associated with that. But give us a little overview of what you provided to me, which is very, very, I know there's a lot of pages of data and research that's behind this information, but please share that out with us, and we'll open it up to the panel to weigh in on that information.
Right. Well, yes, thank you. I wanted to also mention that, I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time, I am also a poli-sci major. I don't know if you know that, Shanna. Providence College, way back though, so probably.
Not as far as I'm back.
Anyway, yes. I think we'll let Shanna talk about these specific outcomes, but I think what really drove us to digging deep and working with the Department of Labor and Training and Data Spark and professor at Rhode Island College, Michaela Arthur, to really kind of ask these research questions and try to get real Rhode Island children, real data, is the fact that, when we are advocating, when we're on a day-to-day basis, like Mary talked about, we work with thousands of children. And over the years, Adoption Rhode Island has been in Rhode Island and working on behalf of kids in the foster care system since 1983. So, we've seen and worked with and cared about thousands and thousands and thousands of kids. And anecdotally, we know what the issues are, but we didn't have any data. And we really need the data to be able to then have benchmarks so that obviously we can talk to policymakers like you to say, listen, it's not just a few kids that are suffering here. There's quite a few kids, there's quite a few barriers, and we need to do something about it. And so we do know from national studies that that children in foster care, aren't doing as well as they should do. They move a lot because of going from placement to placement. And of course, when you do move, if you lived in Cumberland for a while and then you move to Smithfield and then, down to Woonsocket and then, over to Warwick in, a short period of time, it impacts you in a lot of ways, and it definitely impacts your educational outcomes.
Yeah.
And
one of the things, Darlene, that you've tracked 10,000 kids, according to what I've read in that data. And I don't know who wants to speak to that, but then you also tracked it back into the education outcomes through information, and then went to DLT to track income issues as well. So I don't know if anybody wants to weigh into that, but I point that out because the people who are watching this, we hear, your experience, just like I would have, and talk to a young kid that I may have coached basketball, and that's a personal experience. When you dig in to tracking that number and you get back information, that's more than anecdotal. That's really hard case data that we should be working off of in terms of a policy. But 10,000, and then I don't know who might be aware of that information, but please weigh in on that. What you found out with those 10,000 Rhode Islanders that you did some work with. Anybody can jump in.
So I can talk a little bit about it. So, this was analysis done by DataSpark, which we worked with the DLT and RIDE to get this data analysis done. And what DataSpark has done is worked with the various state agencies to bring the data together to be able to see what the trends are across agencies. Because quite often we have this siloed data, so we can't see, how much is a high school degree worth, because that data ends up in DLT. Your high school degree, we know RIDE knows it, but DLT doesn't, right? And so they were able to work with us to bring this data together. And, I think, some of the critical numbers, which are just so important from this, and I think it's important to contextualize them, right, is that, well over half of the foster youth either don't graduate or somehow drop out of the system so that we don't know where they are, right? And so that's a sign, really, that the number who are graduating is even lower than what our data tells us, because they're dropping out so early from the system that we can't track them. But, when you have what the data tells us is that, a maximum number is that 49% of foster youth are actually making it to graduation.
Yep.
And that's
from high school. That's high school, Shanna, right?
That's high school.
Yes.
Right. So, in that number, when you look at the graduation statistics nationwide of just average these days, right, it's well over 80%. And in many places, it's over 90%. The kids are making it through high school, even in high poverty districts. And so if people want to point to poverty, that's not the rationale here. And a lot of the things that Darlene has been talking about, is what the research really shows, which is when they move schools and high schools, they lose credits. Yep. Things don't transfer perfectly, even when you just move from Warwick to Providence, or Cranston to East Greenwich. You move, a mile down the road and you lose credits towards graduation. And these are the exact type of barriers that fall in place to foster youth that don't fall in place to other kids, and really present this barrier to graduation. So that's, one of the data points that I would point to. The other big data point that I would point to is that, when we do find this population of kids in the foster system in Rhode Island who do make it to graduation, that only 32% of them end up enrolling in college. Now, that number is very low. 70% of high school graduates nationwide go on to college. 54% of low-income kids who graduate from high school go on to college. But only, a third of Rhode Island's foster youth who graduate from high school go on to college. And that's, really critical. And then the next step that our data showed was only 104 out of that original 10,000 number you were talking about. Only 104 kids graduated from college or got any credit-bearing certificate. And I think that's the number that, at least I know Darlene and I kind of walked away with this, how can we own that number, right? 104 kids, starting out with 10,000 kids in the, who have been through the system that we can trace in the data. And we end up with 104 kids who got some sort of credit-bearing certificate or college graduation. So that's what the data says to us, and what I think really is a call to arms right now.
And Shanna, kind of like finishing out some of the data, and then I want to get back into, what are we doing and do for that individual young kid, young girl or boy, and that's something that everybody on this call is interested in, but the data really drives it. We did a report back in 2009 to show the economic impact of reaching higher levels of education in our schools across the board. And what we found was, and And we gave that report to the General Assembly. And it's standards that, measurement standards, just like you're measuring now. I happen to believe that measuring is good. It's not an indictment on anybody, the kids, the parents, or the teachers. I just think that we need to know how well they can read and how well they can do math. But if we look at those data points, if we increase our outcomes to like a national average, for instance, there's over $1 billion more of earning power available for the families that live in the state of Rhode Island. If we increase it to the top tier school districts as they're measured in the country, which happens to be Massachusetts, we increased the earning power for the families in the state of Rhode Island by about $2 billion, as much as $2 billion. That's a huge amount of money in a population our size, and that makes a dramatic difference. Share the average income right now of a foster child in Rhode Island in your study. I got it in front of me, but I don't know if you do or not, but I do. It appears to be about $7,800, almost $79,000, just under $8,000 a year for a young person. I'm not sure what age it raises up, but it's after high school age, anyways, about $8,000 a year. When you start looking at those numbers, and I want to open up this conversation. Okay, what are the remedies that you think that can actually lift it up? I mean, Mary has the experience, of being in front of the classroom and being a principal, and now in the work now. But no one in the state of Rhode Island can survive on $8,000 a year. It's not a possibility. So the cycle of poverty, and as I explained, hurdles to jump increases as kids get older, instead of decreases because of this economic outcome. But yeah, so that's a lot of the data. Let's throw it out a little bit to discussion about, the thought process of taking that one child and changing that child's life through this process, and in particular education. Weigh in on what that looks like, so the people who are watching this, they kind of get an idea. They got an idea of this 30,000 foot view here of the problem, which you just explained very well, Shanna. But what are we going to do for that? What are we going to do for that young kid I coached that was bouncing from couch to couch, and in all essence, he was a foster child by just default because parents weren't around, and just kind of was fending for himself from 12 years old on. And so what's the strategy to help these young kids that you're so passionate about serving? Weigh in again. Just throw out, this will be an open conversation, but give us your thoughts on it.
Well, I think that basically, as we're even with the data, we're looking at all these different databases that are separate, as Shanna said, and for kids in foster care, I mean, they are our children. They are our state's children. They are all of our responsibility, and so they don't fall into one agency, one organization, one town or community, right? So I think that, and that's why to some extent they also fall through so many cracks, is that they really, we really need a multi-agency, multi-community strategic plan that really looks and addresses all of these issues. So, I mean, we got this initial data, we got a lot of, it's difficult data, but it's good data in the sense that we know we have a problem, okay? And we know now that we need more data. So we need to drill down a little more. We need to know when do we start seeing some of these issues? Is it the school suspension? Is it how many schools that is it that each school is, suspending kids, or, what are the individual issues for these children? So then we can have some more individualized approaches. We also need, as Mary talked about First Star, we do need some more specialized programs that are good models, which, I clearly believe, and we know based on the outcome data we had with First Star, a model like that works. Okay. So we need to have some of those here in Rhode Island. We need to not just, pilot them, but we need to embed them into our system. And we need to continue to work. And that's why I get really excited about working with URI and other partners around the state, and really building coalitions around taking care of these kids. So it's a combination of things, but part of it is raising awareness so that there's intentionality that we're going to make a difference, because I believe we can.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Let me put a face to all of this.
Yeah,
I'm going to
that's what
tell
I
you
wanted to
about one of the students that was in the First Star URI Academy. But first of all, First Star URI Academy is actually a national program. We were number 2 in the nation. It started at UCLA out in California, and Karen Davis, the vice president of a senior VP of Hasbro at the time, brought the program to URI and asked them if they would be interested. So we were the second program in the nation to identify foster kids who wanted to go to college and to help them get there. There are currently 15 of those in the nation. We are the only one that's dropped out because we could not secure sustained funding. We were also the only one of the 15 that didn't get any state support. You can look right next door to UConn, and their entire program is run by their Department of Children and Families. But anyway, back to my student. I'll call her Stephanie. I'm not going to use her real name. But Stephanie, between grades 1 and 8, went to 7 different schools. She bounced from foster home to foster home, sometimes went back to the same district, but 7 different schools. She went to 3 different high schools. When she finally got into the final high school that she eventually graduated from, they had her in all low-level classes. We got her in First Star, and she said, I really want to go to college. I never thought about it before, but now that you're telling me about this program, I'd like to go to college. So we went into the high school, changed her schedule, made sure she had foreign language, made sure she had her algebra credits, because if you don't have those 2 things and pass your other subjects, you're not going to college. So we did that. She graduated this past May. She graduated from a 4-year school. She went there on scholarship, and she's now looking for a job in international business. So by having resources and supports who could go in and advocate for her, who could help her, we got her tutoring when she needed it. She made up some summer school credits with our program. That's a model that worked. It definitely worked for these kids. And as I said, 24 of 26 of them graduated high school on time. More than 50% of them went on to college, some form of college. Community College of Rhode Island, URI, RIC, out-of-state schools, but they had the chance. We gave them the chance to do this. And then when you look at the other, there, as Darlene was just saying, there isn't a lot of data. And the Every Student Succeeds federal regulation says states are supposed to be collecting data on children in foster care, the suspension rates, disciplinary referrals, absenteeism, how many of them are involved in advanced placement classes, those types of things. And I know that there's some legislation. I believe it's Representative Casimiro, Darlene. She's working on getting that so that we can get that information, and that will help bolster, I think, our argument that we need to do more for these kids.
Yeah. So Mary, when I look through my dad's notes, he's kind of someone that is clearly one of the wisest people I've ever met. But he said very simply, you show a young person you care, that's going to drive them to success. And so that's what you did with your Stephanie, or whatever you wanted to refer to.
There's a quote that I teach in the education department at URI as well. There's a quote that I tell the students: kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, that's it. My dad said, hey, show a kid you care. At the time it was a boy because it was a boys club, but I paraphrase, show a kid you care. And that's going to give them the reason to succeed.
Absolutely.
And there's no question about that. So let me ask you a question here. I'll ask a question. I'll make the mistake that every attorney shouldn't, but I'm not an attorney, so I can make the mistake. The issue of how much that young girl went through multiple different schools and different school districts. Is there a way that, because I happen to think that, and I was talking to our superintendent way back in 2000 about, opening up seats. If you got seats, open them up. Let kids come from other districts into the school. Let our kids go across the way. the money, especially the way that we have the funding formula now, the money follows the kid. But is there a way that you could have managed that differently, even though there was, the child was going, but were they close enough to maybe stay in the same district, stay in the same setting? And would that be something
The law
that
has changed.
be valuable?
The law has changed. The Every Student Succeeds Act now says every effort must be made to keep that child in the home school. So if she wanted to stay in a home school, whatever district she was living in would have had to bus her. That would have happened now, but it didn't happen then. This just came up in the latest legislation. I think it's 2015 that changed. So now we can make arguments to schools. Many school districts saying, no, since you're leaving, you have to get out. Well, we go in with the law, and DCYF workers go in with the law. I've seen them go into the schools, say, no, this child can stay here. And I worked with a young lady for the last 2 years who lived in Cranston, but finished at East Providence High School.
Okay.
I mean, the transportation was an issue, but she was allowed to finish. Yeah.
So that's a reasonable question I'm asking. And also, it would seem as though that if young kids are again, going back to the, coming from, families that are not as challenged as others, and they move out of district, and let them move out of district, but when you've got a base of young kids that is proven, and you've got the data to show that, there should be a play. And the state, I've always felt as though that the piece that's missing in the school funding formula are these special need kids that should be funded in a state pool of money as opposed to a local districts, because what those local districts are saying, I don't want that student there because it's going to cost us money. Right. So, but it should be a pool of dollars that's set aside so that no school district gets blown up their budget because of a high price student, a high cost student comes in for whatever reason, or a special, scenario like this. It would seem as though there should be a pool to help offset that cost, so that district says, oh yeah, I got busing covered. Heck, we cover the busing for kids to go from my town to a private school, right? We cover the busing cost for that. So it would seem as though in this scenario that if that's what you're telling me, and the professionals like you saying that movement, of that constant movement, is causing problems for these young kids, and the outcome on their academics and their outcomes on their high school graduation rates and their potential college attendance and their income levels, I think you can make a real strong argument, as you're doing right now, but that would seem to make sense, and an argument with the state that they should be pooling money for these special exception strategies that are out there, and identify what they are. Don't give something to somebody who doesn't need it, but somebody who needs it, identify it and use it there. Steve, weigh in a little bit about what you see as like long-term strategies to help that young kid that you're working with right now. What do you want to see happen for that young boy or girl that's in your system that you've met and probably given a Christmas present to this year? So
I'll come from two perspectives. One, from a person who's been involved with First Star, from just hosting the kids at the bank and having conversation with them, and I can't tell you the amount of passion and excitement they have when they're in that program as their opportunity going forward. But secondary, Lieutenant Governor, I actually chair the audit subcommittee board for Charahoe School District School Committee. So I understand the budgets of school districts, and I also understand the immense amount of, let's just say, pressure to reduce out of district busing at the same time as bringing them in because of revenue stream. It's a broken funding formula in order to provide services for kids like these who need to remain in certain areas and districts to achieve their true competency. To think about kids who move out of district times without the means and supports to try and get through high school doesn't make any sense. In a state our size, with the amount of districts that we have, there's no reason why we can't keep kids where they're going to perform at the highest level. So Steve, I'll talk to you at two levels. The secondary level is... Well,
let me ask you a question. Get to the secondary in a second. I wanted to follow up on that. Yeah. You're a number guy. How would you make those numbers work? I mean, because you're not talking... What are you talking about in a year to bus a child? Is it $1,000, $2,000? It can't be much more than that, right?
It isn't much more than that. And I think if collectively the school districts could work together with, shrinking the bus companies' contracts to work a little bit more in a collaborative effort, you can certainly achieve this. And to your point earlier, we're not worried about kids being bussed out for private school and charter schools, but now we're concerned about a poor, and again, it's a double-edged sword. We need foster families, we need foster parents, no matter where they live. So if you're taking a kid from Johnston and you're moving them to Richmond to give them a loving, caring home, that's the first and most important part from a self-actualization process. However, the secondary piece is they need the educational support. So why are we going to, if those parents in Richmond are willing to let that child stay in a Johnston school, we're going to create this barrier for them. It doesn't make sense both economically nor educationally, and it certainly doesn't make sense from a proficiency standpoint as these kids go on to adulthood, and we want them to integrate into our society and our community in a way that they give back. It's a very difficult thing, both from a business perspective and educational perspective. And just so everybody's putting their hand in the fire as their background, I have a degree in psychology with a concentration in education. I am not an economics, nor am I a business major. So I'm coming at this from that point of view as well.
Yes, well, Stephen, I'll get you into the second level you want to get into, but let me just kind of finish that thought a little bit, because I think you're talking about policy here, and I think it's driven by the data that Shauna's talking about, and then it's projected in terms of like a exchange of ideas of how to get to a point that you need to get to. You know, if you have a young child that ends up in a permanent location, at some point in time, if you can kind of measure that, then they show up in that school district because they're going to be there. They're not going to do what Mary just said with 11 different changes in 12, 13 years, because if they're actually steady there, then they lose the argument to say, oh, I got to keep them there because, you know, they're stationary in that situation where they actually have some permanency. But if they're still in flux, then you got to kind of stick to the spot you're in. I think the data pretty well shows that you need to do that. Sorry about that. Go ahead, get your second point out, please.
Well, the other piece of it was in going to Dr. Pearson's point about the loss of credits. Again, in a small state with so many districts, there should be no reason why a child moving from one school district to another who's taken the classes, who has passed the class, should lose credits transitioning into there, because we've had some wonderful people and some wonderful families have decided to take a child in as a foster child and support them. That's another thing that, again, we're not trying to create a specialty area for these kids, but we're trying to be more cognizant and more empathetic about the fact that, hey, they have met requirements in one district. They should transition fully at 100% into another district to keep them on the path of graduating. Because as we know, as we put those barriers in front of these children where they don't think they're going to graduate on time, where they're going to feel socially awkward at that point being older graduates, it makes it a larger struggle for them to want to finish.
Yeah, so Steve, after you kind of, and again, you know, I speak from a little bit of more like personal experience with individuals, not collectively, as Sean is talking about in terms of data driven, but I certainly have had people provide me with background information, you know, on these things. And, you know, after you take care of the shelter and the, you know, the food and the, you know, the health issue, I don't know what stacks up higher than education after you get past those issues, because now you're talking about the future issue, you know, the future health of that student, the future economy of that student, the future, you know, of the ability to provide shelter and heat and food and that type of thing. And then when they eventually raise their own family, you know, the permanency of that can transfer as well, in terms of not repeating what that child might have went through if you do it right. So yeah, the investment in this is short money on the things we're talking about. I'd like to spend the last few minutes and then we'll wrap it up. But I want to go back to that college program, Mary, that you're in. And I want Steve to share what he shared. You know, I want him to share this with, you know, in terms of what that was cost. That program for those 25 kids was a couple $100,000. Is that what it was?
No, I was close to 200,000 for 25 kids. Yeah, that was the year-round support, including living on campus for a month, room and board, activities, materials. And then during the course of the year, I had a AmeriCorps Vista worker with me. So the two of us followed the kids throughout the year, would go to their school meetings, check on, make sure they need any, if they needed tutoring, any help, any like backboards for their science project. We were there to make sure they had that. Some of them were in group homes, and it was difficult for the group home leaders to get to the schools. So we became almost like educational advocates for them, not the same kind as the
Yeah,
department.
Steve, I think you shared with me that that you had about $100,000 shortfall to reduce the program because you had a matching strategy on that, if I recall our conversation.
Yes, at one point,
I'm wrong,
Hasbro was
but I think
matching.
that's what you mentioned, right?
Yeah, Hasbro was giving us 100,000 towards the 200,000, so it was a $100,000 impact to the state at the time.
Yeah. And were they willing to kind of commit for a long period of time on that, or was it year over year, or did you get them for 3 years, 5 years? Or something like that?
Hasbro it was 7 years. They committed
7 years.
to 7 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And we were trying to get other corporate sponsors in the state. And we got, I can't say that we didn't get, we did. We got from CBS, from Providence Journal, Rhode Island Foundation,
Yeah.
Trimix Foundation. We did, but to sustain it going forward, we just could not get it. So we went and made a presentation to a former DCYF director. We thought we might be able to get some, and then we didn't. So the program officially ended in 2018-19.
Well, budgets are
But we
tough.
still
I mean,
follow the kids.
you know, as a former mayor, Mary, if you don't roll that into the budget in terms of the tax rate, you know, then it's difficult to kind of, you know, find the money every year. You gotta layer that into the budget and be committed that that's part of your tax structure. You know, you've already collected the money for
Darlene
it.
was up at the State House lobbying for it.
I
Darlene
know.
was at the State House. We were testifying, asking for
Yes.
it, but it didn't
Well,
work out.
I'm interested in it. So and also I know that with the discussions I'm having with national people in the education, because I am interested in a couple programs. Have you heard that, you know, I'd like to see these municipal education department supplementing the work that you're doing, supplement the work that the school districts are doing. And I think you can do that as we got a model. Like I said, we finished 14 years. We have 3 mayors that actually have managed that education department in the town of Cumberland. It is a you know, a diamond in the rough that no one knows about. Take a look at it, because then you can personalize this if there, you know, 2 specific needs in different communities. But what I'm being told is, and we'll follow it up. I mean, you know, if we're being told that because, in particular for the things I'm talking about, the loss of learning time, that there's awareness on that on the federal level. And Dr. McKee has talked to me, and Mike now, he heads up Chiefs for Change nationally. He helped start the education department, the Office for Children's Learning in Cumberland with me, and then he went on to chair the nonprofit side of the Mayoral Academy Board, which we're going to be reactivating now for these type of programs, not to open up more mayoral academies, but it's to actually start talking about these specific things in terms of gaps that currently exist, and then figure out, you know, fund certain reports that can actually do that. And I want to talk to Darlene about that, because the one piece I think you need a roadmap here, a document of some sort that is really, you know, factual, as we did on some other things that we've worked on. And I'd love to talk to you about that. But I think that my point is, don't give up on that idea, because I think that it's one that really needs to be redone, you know, and reactivated. And if Hasbro's in, then I would be making a little quiet call to them and just see whether they're still interested. And then let's, you know, continue how to figure out how to fill that void, and great to keep the partnership going with URI. So anyways, we're kind of coming down to the end of the hour, but Darlene, final words for you, and thank you all for being here. We'll go around and give everybody a final shot at saying something and sharing this information out. Go ahead, Darlene.
Well, I just want to say thank you again for this conversation, for your passion, for your commitment, and really for your knowledge on this area. I mean, it's been a pleasure talking with you and thinking about what is possible for these children and what is possible for the state of Rhode Island, as far as really, you know, looking at this data, admitting that it's not good, and saying we can actually be the best in the country if we choose to be. It's an investment in these kids, and so I think if we can work together, we can actually make a huge difference. So I just want to say thank you, and I look forward to working with you, and I look forward to creating that kind of a strategic document that helps us to build a path forward.
Yeah, I think we can help with that. I think we can help with that, and we'll follow up with you on that. There's work to be done, and there's a lot of good work that's going on, but there's a lot more that we can do. Mary, final words from you, and final thoughts, and go Sean, and I'll end up with the. With the board chair,
thank you
Walker,
also.
Executive Director. Yes.
I'm very energized by this discussion today because I loved the program that we had, and we learned a lot of lessons from that program that I think we could make a phenomenal model. These kids need it, they want it, and they deserve it. So I say let's get working on it.
Great. Shauna, down there, you all right? You got a lot of fans. I can tell you got a big fan in my office with Cheyenne.
Well, I'm a big fan of hers. It was so exciting to see her name on the email for this invite. It was very exciting to see one of my former students. I always love it when we see our students in great places working with great people and doing great things. So you got a good one. To close us out, I'll just say,
Cheyenne, as you finish that, because and it's political, but it shows how young kids can really do really extraordinary things. So Cheyenne was like the lead person for Rhode Island for the Biden campaign. By the time it was done, I obviously provided some of the, the contacts and some of the leadership to take the positions I took on that. But Cheyenne was the lead person in Rhode Island on calls with people all around the country. And so much so that in the end, there was about 5 delegates that would be, had to be selected. And the Biden national team really went to Cheyenne to fill those last 5 delegates. For a young kid coming out of URI, a couple thumbs up there, right? Go ahead, Shauna. Go ahead. Fill in the blanks.
No, that's wonderful. I just wanted to say on this topic, to close it out, I think we'd be amiss to not talk about or to mention the price of going to college and housing, and the rollover effect that has. If I can say one last thing, it's that the social science research on foster youth really shows that one of the things is that when you actually tell kids that we will invest in you, you will be able to afford college, that not only are they more likely to go to college, but even if they don't go to college, they're more likely to finish high school. That signaling from the state that we will invest in you, that you'll be able to afford it, has rollover impact on their entire educational career. And so I think just to think about, that I know money's tight and COVID's going to make it tighter. But being able to tell kids who are, in high school, in the foster care system, that the state believes in you and we believe in you, and if you make it to college, you will be able to afford it and will be able to afford housing while you're in it, which I think a lot of times people just think tuition, but these kids need somewhere to live,
yep,
right, while they're pursuing their educational careers. And so I think there's a lot the state could do to just tell kids, you're our kids and we will invest in you if you make it. And so I'll just close out with that. So thank you so much for having me. This was a wonderful opportunity.
Great having you. Okay, Steve, you're the chair of the board. Tell us why all this should be happening and why people watching this should be really, finding ways to help out with the mission of the foster care in Rhode Island.
Well, basically, the reason it should be happening is, as anybody who's paying attention to tonight, you have yourself, along with Darlene and Mary and Shauna, who are very passionate about the direction of foster youth, but all youth in our state. And I think if you feel any type of empathy and compassion for this, it's a big need. And so just to piggyback on Shauna a little bit, from a financial perspective, and you talk about both financial and the social sciences end of it, when we think about that First Start program, we're talking about 25 kids at $100,000. It's $4,000 a kid. If each district they came from, and if it's 12 districts, come up with $8,000 a piece, they can keep these kids in that program, and look how fast and far we're going to move it. We also have states that border us that have significant investments in foster youth, paying for their college tuition and room and board to make sure they become successful. How many of those kids then turn out to provide back to the communities that they live in from an economic standpoint.
Right.
It's simple math, it's simple logic, it's simple direction. And if you think there isn't enough passion and direction around this, look at what you did in Cumberland. Look at what everybody else is doing. We have the resources, we have both the knowledge base and the economic structure to build something in for our foster youth, just to that point, to let them know, if nothing else, that, hey, if you put a little effort in, we're going to put 5 times the effort in. We're going to get you to the finish line. We're going to get you there. And then a recipient of that, running a large bank organization, a large company in this state, we're the recipient of that. And we get great people to come into our organization who are willing to give back, willing to volunteer, and willing to provide to the communities that they live in. That's how the circle of events works. And that's the last thing I'd have to say, other than thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for last week's conversation and this week's. I really appreciate you providing a forum for our voices to be heard. It's something that's so critical to the present and the future of our state. So thank you.
Well, I think you guys are right on track in terms of the value of the education, and I don't dismiss at all the day-to-day challenges that these young kids have, having experienced really firsthand in a real way the type of challenges they have. So, got to take care of them there. But your investment here and your insight on the value of this education piece, if you're able to catch your breath, do all the other things that are actually need to be done at this moment, but invest this thought process for this future strategy. I really commend you for your leadership. Let's keep that ball rolling. You're going to change, those 10,000 kids you talked about. You run this strategy for the next 15 years, you're going to impact 10,000 lives, and then all the lives that they touch, but you can't even, it's a geometric type of equation there, right? So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yep, right back at you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you.
Stay safe.
Yeah, be safe. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't need to say much more than that. I do have my mask here, and I want to just have everybody say, let's be safe. Let's wear a mask. Let's save a life. Let's save a job. Let's save a business. Let's invest in Adopt Rhode Island and save, thousands of kids in terms of providing them a future. If you want more information about Adopt Rhode Island and how you can participate, let us know. That program that was at URI, we should make a commitment as a state to make sure that continues year after year, and helping more and more young boys and girls that live in the state of Rhode Island to achieve their dreams. And it's all worth it. So thank you for being here tonight. We'll stay safe. We'll see you Tuesday. And by the way, holiday season, shop local, support us local businesses. That's what I'll be doing this weekend. And I encourage everybody to do the same thing. Good night.